and thank all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for their participation in this important hearing. I've been listening carefully to today's testimony. As I said earlier, I had hoped today would be a turning point for the oil industry. I was grateful to hear the top fossil fuel CEOs that climate change is real, that burning fossil fuels is causing it, and that we must act urgently to fix it. But I was disappointed that we also heard much of the same denial and deflection we have heard before. Today's witnesses refuse to take responsibility for Big Oil's decades-long disinformation campaign. And even after agreeing that we are, in fact, in, quote, code red, end quote, crisis, they refuse to stop funding groups like the American Petroleum Institute that are still blocking reforms like expanding the use of electric vehicles. So I see no choice but to continue our committee's investigation until we see the truth. We requested documents from each of these companies 6 weeks ago, which were due on September 30th. We followed up before the due date to identify categories of documents that were of particular importance to be produced quickly. After they missed the deadline, we sent warning letters to all 6 companies urging them to complete their productions by October 25th or face further action. Unfortunately, none of the 6 entities have produced a substantial portion of the key documents the committee requested. Instead, they produced reams of other documents, many of which were publicly available. One entity sent in 1,500 pages printed from their own website, available publicly, along with 4,000 pages of newsletters filled with industry press releases. Others sent us thousands of pages of publicly available annual reports and the company's postings on Facebook and LinkedIn. Now, let me tell you what the fossil fuel companies have not produced. These organizations have not produced the detailed funding information that we requested and that we need to understand their payments to shadow groups and to over 150 public relations companies and advertisements on social media, payments that today's witnesses seem intent on continuing. Nearly all the companies have failed to turn over board materials the committee needs to examine corporate strategies on climate change. And with only a few limited exceptions, the fossil fuel companies have not produced any internal documents or internal communications from senior executives about their company's role in climate change. I have tried very hard to obtain this information voluntarily, but the oil companies employ the same tactics they used for decades on climate policy: delay and obstruction. Well, that ends today. I am formally notifying the ranking member and members of the committee that I intend to issue subpoenas to the fossil fuel entities represented here today. I have draft subpoenas here. Please know that I do not take this step lightly. When Republican Dan Burton was chairman of this committee, he issued more than 1,000 subpoenas without a single complaint from my Republican colleagues. I have been much more selective, but we are at code red for climate, and I'm committed to doing everything I can to help rescue this planet and save it for our children. We need to get to the bottom of the oil industry's disinformation campaign, And with these subpoenas, we will.
Madam Chair.